peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
To you, and thank you so much for finding time to be with us today. This is Good Morning Africa. My name is Miriam Magutu, and it is a pleasure to have you on board today, being the 9th of November 2021. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are tuned in today. I'll take us through quickly on the headlines, and then we will come back together with my panelists, and we shall look at some of these stories. And the main headline on the Standard newspaper this morning: who will stop horror of school infernos? That is what we have there. And then just down there, DP in Kisumu as Jubilee plots his fall. All right, that is interesting. And then Daily Nation: the big high cost of indiscipline. The same headline on the Standard newspaper. And Ruto's date with the Destiny: DP could be kicked out of Jubilee on November 30th during NDC. Kidnapped lawyer returns, refuses to discuss his ordeal. The story is on page 8. Defiled pregnant infected with HIV. Out of 10 girls aged 10 to 19 in Bomet County, 4 fell pregnant in 2021. The county was also leading in teenage pregnancies, going by data from the National Council for Population and Development. And as I was watching that news item yesterday, it's really worrying. Girls as between 10, I think, and 14 years, they account for an increase even in HIV, new HIV and AIDS infection. So that is something that should worry us as a country, even as we work towards, getting zero infections. But if children as young as 10 years old are able to contract HIV, then as a society, we need to stop and look at, what is it that you're doing that is not right, and what can be done differently to ensure that this does not continue to happen. Very well. And then it's end of the road for Sonko, make a way for Governor Kananu. That is on page 6. And court holds a takeover of Kemsa by military as medics sue state. The story is on the back page of the Daily Nation. And then we are missing, I'm here, and well, says Mudavadi as rumors spread. The story is on page 6. And we go to the Star newspaper. The main headline: Uhuru to explain succession game plan at key event. Kenyatta expected to be retained as party leader, handing him sweeping powers to play politics even after retirement. The story is on page 6 of the Star newspaper. Tolerance test as Ruto and Raila storm enemy territory. I don't know why the Star newspaper will think this is a good headline to put, but that is what they are terming. Because I would imagine, when you go to someone else's stronghold, they're not enemies, and if you can go there and convince them as to why they should perhaps change their allegiance, that is just politics. So I think such a headline might be a bit alarming. I don't know, but perhaps I'd like to hear it, what my panelists have to say this morning on the same. NHIF in a sport for failing to refund 400 million Kenya shillings extra police cover. The story is on page 8. All counties to get strawberry ARVs for children by January 2022. All right, the story is on page 3. An ex-convict, the missing terrorist El Kiva Bwire, he was released from Kamiti on October 28th, abducted in the same day, had served 10 years in jail, had been sentenced to life in jail, confessed in 2011 to be an Al-Shabaab, carried grenade to Nyayo Stadium on 2011 Mashujaa Day. So this is a dangerous man on the news, but he's not there. He's been missing since his release from committee. The story is on page 2 of the Star newspaper. So that is what we have on the front pages of the leading newspapers this morning. I'd like to bring in Sharon Gitonga, a journalist from Nairobi. Sharon Gitonga, very good morning to you.
Thank you very much, Miriam, and a very good morning to you back at the headquarters in Nairobi. My co-panelists, Samuel Tawish and Daniel Wesonga. It is a pleasure to be part of this morning show, and a very good morning to also our viewers who are watching us in Africa and across the globe at large. Good morning.
Good morning to you, and we're also joined by Daniel Wesonga from Nairobi. Daniel Wesonga, good morning.
Yes, very, very good morning, Miriam. A very good morning to my good brother Tarisho Lesasina and Sharon Gitonga, and our viewers here in Kenya and the rest of the globe.
Okay, and also Samuel Tawish, a journalist from Nairobi. Samuel Tawish, a very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Miriam Mugutu. Good morning to my colleague panelist, Sean Wesonga, Sharon Gitonga, and all our viewers who are watching this program in Africa and the rest of the world.
Okay, so let's just start with the headlines this morning. First of all, this headline on the Star newspaper, I'd like to, if you just read it and you're a Kenyan and you didn't go into the details of that story, a tolerance test as Ruto and Raila storm enemy territory. That is how the Star has put it. That kind of headline, Sharon Gitonga, what do you make of it?
Thank you very much, Miriam. And I also tend to think I don't also, sideline with a headline, given that we are actually preaching, a politics of tolerance, a politics, of diversity, politics, mature politics, even in the spirit of handshake. So for me, even as the deputy president is expected to tour, Raila's, backyard, I am actually expecting a very, a level politics of, political level playing field, just like what happened. When actually Raila went to Eldoret, we didn't have any backlashes, and if any actually backlashes happen, I actually expect the culprits to be brought to book. Let every leader be allowed to actually transverse any part of this region to sell their manifesto to the people. Remember, at the end of the day, the people will actually have to decide. At the end of the day, the people are going to determine who they want. So let no person actually be bad or be viewed as actually coming to a certain region as an enemy. So and in any case, we actually said, if you are actually do not read in the same line with these political parties, just stay at home. So let every leader be given a chance to give out their view. But I'm actually curious to see how Ruto is actually going to behave in this region. Is he actually going to have the audacity to call Baba Mganga? We've seen him actually. We've seen how he actually conducts his politics, and especially at the political in every political rally that he gathers. So I'm actually holding my breath. In as much as we are trying to preach the politics of tolerance. How he's actually going to handle this place. We know it's actually a very a stronghold of Baba, and I also have a recommendation for Ruto, and I mean not just Ruto, for all other political parties as they actually go out to sell their agenda. I wish they would actually get to their designated areas, or even actually go to the stadiums, because I've had complaints of even my own friends who've actually had to stay on traffic, and even because these people actually they actually block the daily commotions what they're actually doing. So I would it could actually be a recommendation, and not just for the deputy president but all other leaders, for them to actually move to the designated areas or even the stadium, so that they can actually sell their manifestos there, so that they don't block commotion of people or the daily business, because at the end of the day business has to run. We cannot have a show stop down because of their agendas. Thank you, Miriam.
So the activities cause a lot of commotion and inconvenience among the residents in the different places they go to. Sam Walter-Wish, a tolerance test as DP Ruto and Raila storm what the Star newspaper calls enemy strongholds. What do you make of that headline before you even get into the details of what is happening?
Thank you so much, Miriam, and thank you to colleague panelist. Indeed, Miriam, personally and from where I sit, I do not see anything wrong with that headline. For the simple reason is that the word enemy has been put in quote. And the reason why that has been put like that is because you don't need to take it literally as that as Raila going to Eldoret or Ruto going to Kisumu as being an enemy as a literal meaning. But I think basically what they're trying to say is that this is a competitor's bastion. This is an opponent's bastion. And even for newspapers really to sell, they would rather have, of course, use that word enemy. And they were so careful. That is why you see, even when trying to read it, they have put it in quotes. But I do not quite see that there's a big problem. That is what politics has always been. Because, again, it is more of like a high-octane political tour for Deputy President William Ruto. And a high-octane political tour for Raila Odinga when he visited Eldoret. Of course, the eyes were really there to see what was going to unfold. But luckily enough and fortunate enough, Raila Odinga being a person who carries himself with utmost civility and decorum, you could quite see how he interacted and the kind of reception he got in Eldoret. And I want to quite agree with what Sharon Gitonga has mentioned. That we expect as Deputy President William Ruto goes to the Nyanza region and particularly Luo Nyanza to be very keen also on not provoking the populace or provoking, of course, the voters from that region, because there can be as well a wider scheme to try and go there and provoke the electorates by maybe, say, for example, using unprintable names against former Prime Minister and ODM Supremo Raila Amolo Odinga. You know, as much as we all know in this panel, that region many or more often has been voting for Raila Amolo Odinga as far as he's been contesting for presidency. So to them, he's undisputed leader of the Luo people. And if you go there and you want to provoke the people or you want to stretch beyond the limits by using unprintable words against Raila Amolo Odinga, then you should certainly expect that things are not going to be rosy for you. I've been to Luo Nyanza, I've been to Homa Bay, Migori, Kisumu, Siaya, and most parts of those places that Raila Odinga commands a sizable support. And I can quite tell you, Miriam, that those people are so receptive, but their good reception can only stretch as far as respect Raila Amolo Odinga, who they perceive as the undisputed leader. So if you go there and use the words like what the Ruto and the allies usually use in other forums in different places in this country, then you must really expect that there's going to be a revolt against Deputy President William Ruto. But I want to hope his visit to that place is sincere and honest, and it's more geared on trying to sell his policies and agenda to the people of Nyanza, and to tell them what he will do for them, assuming he becomes president in next year's general election. But if it's about provoking the individuals from that region, so that to get an excuse to bar Raila Odinga or disrupt Raila Odinga's rallies in his perceived strongholds as well, then that is something that must be reprimanded. But I think the politics of tolerance is that which we have to embrace, so that each and everyone can really move freely in any part of this country and speak to the people and sell his policies, so that the people of Kenya can have really can be able to make a choice and a decision when it comes to the ballot next year. I submit, Miriam.
Very well said. Thank you so much. Sam Walter-Wish for that. Now the story is on page 4. Before Daniel, you come in, Kenya's political maturity and tolerance will be sorely tested as big wigs expand their campaigns beyond their strongholds into perceived enemy territory. Deputy President William Ruto on Tuesday begins a 3-day tour of ODM leader Raila Odinga's Nyanza backyard. The DP and his boss, President Uhuru Kenyatta, has largely given the region a wide berth. in previous polls. Ruto has been to Migori and was hosted at the home of Governor Okoth Obado with Raila's blessings. Raila is also planning an extensive visit to South Rift weeks after he staged a mega rally in Eldoret, a town seen as Ruto's political capital. In recent weeks, Ruto has camped in Ukambani while Raila has pitched tent in Mount Kenya in a new vote hunting strategy. And of course, we'll be waiting to see how that will pan out. But apparently now politicians are visiting the enemy's territory, strongholds. Daniel Wesonga.
Yes, thank you so much, Miriam, of course. And to me, I think our media sometimes goes overboard in that they dwell so much on sensational reporting. In as much as the media should actually make their merchandise sell, I believe they should be very, very sensitive to the kind of language that they use. And my brother Tarisho Lesasina gave some substitutes to such a word, and he talked about opponents or maybe arch rivals. And that could best suit such a particular headline. But when you talk about enemies, be it in quotes or without, it actually evokes some feeling of animosity and fear among us Kenyans. And so to say, Miriam, I believe as a Kenyan people, we have really come far in terms of political maturity. Right now, Kenyans will tolerate any particular candidate. You will go anywhere in this country and be able to sell your manifesto without maybe being heckled or maybe pelted by stones. And that is what we have seen even with Raila Odinga climbing Mount Kenya. No one will have ever imagined that Raila Odinga will go to Nyeri or even to Nyandarua and hold a mammoth rally and come back in Nairobi in one piece. But as it is right now, I think Kenyans have come of age and actually are looking at the bigger picture in making sure that they give every political leader the space to sell their agenda and manifesto, regardless of where they come from or regardless of their political inclination. So to me, it will be a clarion call to the media to actually also balance up with where the people are. The people are moving progressively into civility. The media should also move in such a direction. It should not get us back to the olden days where political animosity was fodder for mileage between political rivals. So to me, I think this country belongs to all of us, like President Uhuru Kenyatta says, and anyone is free to campaign in any particular region of this country. There is no any particular area which is maybe earmarked as Ruto's or maybe Raila's or Kalonzo's or even Abdubadida's. So the issue of saying that political enemies are campaigning in each other's background, I think is a bit archaic and backwards for the media to actually propel. When you look at the campaigns in more developed democracies like America, the media is always actually very keen, and it goes to an extent of even having a badge and censoring those political players who appear to be more of spreading hate and actually divisions among the electorates. So here in Kenya, I think it is so much baffling that the media, instead of being that kind of referee, creating a deterrent towards against political hate and maybe fear-mongering, it is actually leading in such kind of retrogressive expeditions. So to me, I think, Miriam, the media should have used a better word, especially at a point where we are having succession politics. Because when you're having a succession politics, you realize that it's always a very, very heated arena where people, actually communities, are fighting to get the share of the next government. So to me, I think the media should do better. I submit.
Okay, thank you so much. And we turn our attention now to the Daily Nation. And the main headline is the high cost of indiscipline, wave of unrest. Parents slapped with bills amounting to millions of shillings for reconstruction and repair of damaged buildings, while students found culpable face expulsion from school and permanent criminal tag that will see them rejected in other institutions, bringing their learning to an end. And I think we saw that stand a warning that the CS for Education Professor Magoha gave yesterday. Will this help in deterring some of these students who obviously are indisciplined and the situations that we've been seeing in our schools? Sharon Gitonga.
Thank you very much, Miriam. And indeed, it's quite a step, but in the long run, we actually need to look at the solution more than the problem here, and we need to actually dig deeply to actually find the root cause of this. And I think we had actually an extensive discussion yesterday, and I think at some extent I saw some people actually saying that it's time we actually bring the corporal punishment. And for me, I don't think it's
the corporal punishment never really left. Have you not heard stories of children still being beaten in schools? That never stopped. Maybe in private schools. But private schools it still happens. I can tell you that for free.
but I think for some reason, it has not actually been it has not been there. I think in most of the schools that I've had, I think children are no longer beaten. But be as it may, as much as you'd want it to come back, we need to dig at the deep root cause. Yesterday we pointed out where the root cause is. Parents have the bigger chunk to actually play when it comes to the most of the indiscipline. Why? Because they just, we've just been reluctant. I think it's the generation of caught kababa and kamama, whereby you are actually spoiled. And if anything, you've seen even in the estates when your child is actually caught of having fought or anything, the parents are the first ones to actually pinpoint a parent, and they do not even discipline their children. So whatever that is actually happening right now is a reflection of us as parents, of how we have actually been disciplining our children. I think the technology has also played such a big role. You discover that we're actually in the era of, we are in the global village. There's so much information that is available on the internet. Again, coming back to the parents, do we even, take time to actually, try and see what our children actually do when in our absence? You discover there's so much content in the online space that children are actually consuming. When I go back to now, and I think yesterday you actually brought the issue of why is this actually in public schools and not actually in private schools. There's also the problem of, a weak administration when it comes to schools. I talk about, intelligence systems. Do we have watchmen? Do we have even policemen to actually guard this, or they're actually just ran as, just like a market where anyone can just walk in? Because I've seen photos of, students actually holding petrol, and then you wonder how on earth where do they even get, how do they even bring in this petrol in school at the first place, which is quite unfortunate that our systems, we have very, weak systems, weak administration systems. Moving forward, I think we need to, from where I sit, I would actually advise let schools actually, indefinitely close down, so that it can actually give the management, time to actually, brainstorm and actually think about the way forward. Because if you continue having, the rise in the banning of schools, it's quite unfortunate. And when we might actually celebrate that there are no lives are lost, but we are not looking at massive properties that have been destroyed. As I finalize, I was looking at the case of Buruburu girls, where they were actually told to bring 1,500. To every parent should actually bring 1,500. Looking at 1,400 of them. So if you do the math, it's actually 2.1 million, and it's only one cubicle that was actually destroyed. So at the end of the day, parents are actually losing. So something really needs to be done.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I saw a parent complaining about the same. They were trying to do the same math you're doing there, Sharon, and they're saying, how is this even making sense? Because some of our daughters did not even participate in starting these fires. But also there's the issue of safety of our children in these schools, because like you've asked there, Sharon, where do they get this petrol? I saw the same photo yesterday trending online of children who were caught with, what looked like, I think, petrol or something like that. So who bought, and it's a boarding school, where did they get, that petrol? Who, brought it in for them? Who is involved in this? Who allowed them to leave the school premises and to come in? Because I told you my son is in a boarding school right now. There's no way he's leaving that gate if I'm not there to pick him up. Like, it is as simple as that. It does not matter what time. But now the safety of our children in some of these schools, this is something that we should worry about as a country, and these fires that happen here. Daniel Wasonga.
Yes, thank you so much, Miriam. And of course, I saw also that particular trending photo, and I think it is a school from either Kwale County or Taita Taveta. But the story was that this particular student worked in collaboration with a day scholar student who went out there and bought petrol. But also now that begs the question, who on earth sells an underage kid petrol at a petrol station? So that tells you that as a society we have failed. There's no one, the height of this banning of schools who will even actually with a sane conscience sell petrol to a student. So it means if not for the intelligence that actually fell before the desk of the principal and had these culprits nabbed, we will have been adding another statistic of a banned school maybe in that particular county. But because the society is very, very neglect of whatever is happening, and we seem to be so much blind to the morality and the way we should actually guide our children going into the future. We seem to be dismissive and not to bother about what kids do with their own lives in regards to how they should be behaved. And also, you've talked about the social media and technology. You know, today you realize that even as young as 12 years or 10 years, you find a kid owning a smartphone. You do not have control of whatever they watch on those smartphones. You do not have control of whatever influences they get. So as a parent, and you realize that most of the Kenyan parents are actually absent in their kids' life. Yesterday, we were talking about how disgruntled they were when CBC was introduced. That tells you the extent of neglect, the absentee parenting that is actually taking place here in Kenya. Now, let's go to the issue of perhaps these kids just spontaneously breaking from the schools and wanting to be home. There was a research which was done in the US, and this is documented in a certain book by Malcolm Gladwell. This research showed that kids who came from middle-class households and maybe the lower middle-class households, these are kids whose parents did not have much time with them. These are kids whose parents did not give even counsel to them. And when they came home for holidays or maybe after school, there was no one even to look at their homework or make sure that they do their homework. So you realize they had a lot of free time. So they had time to move around, play, and do all kinds of manner of things, including even the wrong things that they shouldn't be doing. But when they were, this research was conducted against their counterparts who come from well-off families, they realized that for well-off families, if these kids were not doing their homeworks, either they were taken for swimming lessons or perhaps taken to a musical school or maybe even taken to a library to study and all that. So you realize that this particular group of kids, they were preoccupied every time. So they don't find time to maybe learn something which is retrogressive or maybe get into habits that might actually land them into trouble, maybe distort their futures. So to me, Miriam, I think the current generation with the kind of negligence that parents have, these kids find being at home much better than school. Why? Because when they're at school, teachers are always on their toes with the work and all that kind of thing, and they feel a lot of pressure. But when they come at home, now the inverse happens. They find out a complete opposite of what they are experiencing at school. And at home now, they have all the freedom to be on Facebook, on other social media platforms, and not working at all because perhaps at home there is a house help and something of sort. So there's all that kind of freedom to be lazy and do their own things. So you realize even in earlier years, in 1990s, in early 2000s, we never had, we had banning of schools, but it was never rampant. Why? Because the majority of us who schooled during those years, if you could go back home, perhaps there was no smartphone to keep you company, or maybe as Netflix or these entrappings of technology that are there today. The only thing you could do, maybe your parent could give you a jembe to go and plow the shamba. So most people avoid actually being at home. So, or maybe you could be sent for tuition and more extra classes at home. So you realize that there was nothing to do with technology and all these easy trappings of technology. So to me, I think as parents, we should know that times are changing. the generation that we have today is a different generation that we had maybe previously in the last 10 years. And therefore, they should come up with ways of keeping these young people active even when they're at home, so that when they're at school, they don't feel that they are in some kind of a prison, Miriam. I submit.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, Samuel, I was just going back to that photo that Sharon talked about online about kids who had been found with some petrol. Apparently, from what you're explaining, they had sent the day scholars to bring them in. How are these? Because I'll give an example of my son, because that's what I understand. I never went to a boarding school, so I don't know what that is like and all the horror stories I've heard, especially in public boarding schools. But my son was sick some times back, so I went and took him, and I took him back a few days later. And I went so early because I wanted to take him to school and come back to work, right? But I had to wait. And I was asking, why do I have to wait? No, they have to frisk him before they allow him back to school, back to the dorm, back to the classes. So I had to wait for the person responsible, the teacher responsible, to check him. They checked his bag, they checked his pocket, they checked everything before he was allowed back. As long as you've been out of school, when you're coming back, they have to do that. Every time they're back from midterm, they're back from, closing school, they have to do that. And when I was looking at this story, I wondered, what are some of the security measures? Because as parents, you can imagine how many parents right now cannot even sleep at night because they're wondering, how safe is my child in that school? How am I guaranteed that my child is safe if a petrol can find its way in school? Because other students are able to bring it in school. The failure in some of the security measures in our schools, Samuel Tawish, is that something that should worry us?
Yeah, very true indeed, Miriam. And if you wanted really to understand this kind of mindset, Miriam, you just need to take the context of someone who is getting employed for the first time. When you're getting to an office for the first time, there's always that excitement, there's that enthusiasm in you. You always punctual, you'll always respect your colleagues, you'll always respect your bosses. I mean, you'll always want to do everything right. But when you get used to it, you normalize things. And the kind of humble person that we knew when they were reporting to office is not the same person. And the kind of person who used to say respect the bosses is not the same person. So what point am I trying to build here, Miriam? You've given a very good example of your own case, that when you took back the boy to school, there was a thorough or meticulous check, and of course trying to see to scrutinize and ensure that when the boy is getting back to school, he does not get with anything that is not permitted in that particular institution. So, but what happens thereafter, or after the boy has gotten into school? What normally happens? Is it that the security guys compromise this kind of protocols? Is it that they become more of accomplices to the point that they allow this students just to do these things because they are given maybe a few tokens here and there? It's actually a combination of so many factors. My good brother Sean Wesonga has spoken about negligence. It could as well be about negligence, because it is not possible, Miriam, and you understand this, that a student can get out of school and get back to school, say for example, with the things that are not allowed in that particular school, let alone even petrol, Miriam. Even ask yourself about even foodstuffs. Maybe they are not even allowed to come to school with foodstuffs, even a bread. So how is it possible that a student can get out and come back with, say, 5 liters of petrol? If it is not that, several people have really colluded to see this really happen. Away from that, Miriam, I also want to speak on the issue of course, parents being asked really to pay for the damages that the students have overseen in these particular schools, Miriam. I think there has to be that burden of responsibility, and the burden of responsibility cannot be left on government. It cannot be left to teachers. It still has to go back to the students and, in effect, of course, to the parents. And if this can really serve as a deterrent measure, if it can serve as an example so that the students can collectively be on the watch out, can collectively be vigilant, because, Miriam, it is a double-edged sword. In one way, there will be a feeling like every student will be vigilant. They will always look out on one another and see what they are doing. If they're engaging in a unsuspicious activity, they will be able to report, say, to the prefects or report to the administration so that action can be taken. Another thing, Miriam, that I fear so much is because once this is done, it is going probably also to bolster the morale of those who are so much prone to this vice, those who usually perpetuate this vice in our schools. Why am I saying so? Because they know I am the only person after which who's going to carry a jerrycan and bring about petrol to this school and burn, say, a dormitory. But by the end of the day, a record 1,000 or more students are going to collectively pay for the damage that myself or one person has really overseen. So I think it is something that needs really a delicate balancing act so that by the end of the day, the sole objective must be to serve as a deterrent measure and not to encourage those rogue elements amongst the students really to get a leeway on or to continue with this kind of vice, really at the detriment of other students who are really disciplined in our schools. Right. But I think as I finalize, Miriam, there's a message I want to pass out. You know, it's very less expensive to be disciplined while at school or in any learning institution. And this is what my teachers used to tell us when I was in school, Miriam. Imagine going to school and you become indisciplined. One, you're going to miss on your lessons. Second, look at, for example, the schools that have been touched down. The parents are going to, of course, to compensate this. And maybe their parents who do not have money, they do not have money. They only had maybe the money they used to pay school fees. So they'll have to look out for this money to come and pay for this. When you come back, maybe you're also going to go through another punishment, Miriam. So what am I trying to say in essence? It's less expensive or it's cheaper. It is very good really to be disciplined while at school compared to being indisciplined. So I think our students should be able to balance this and see it fit really to remain disciplined, because by the end of the day, they need to acquire these skills, they need to get this education and knowledge, and even the facilities they're bringing down. There are other, of course, there are other students who are out there, maybe in primary schools, also need to use these very facilities and infrastructure. So they cannot destroy them because another generation will really want to use them in future. I submit. Thank you, Miriam.
Okay, thank you so much. Just before we move on to Emmanuel Sonko, who suffered another loss yesterday, still in schools, and I'll just make reference to my son's school because that is what I understand. I told you I've never been to a boarding school. The first time we went and we were walking through the dorms and around the school and all that, I realized they had a security camera in every possible place they could place it around that compound, be it when you're entering the dorms, be it when you're out in the fields. Like in every possible place they would mount that security camera. They've done that in the school. So perhaps when you're looking at surveillance and perhaps how schools can beef up their security, can employing of technology perhaps help? Because we saw the case of Miranda High School, where they were able to arrest a couple of boys, and because that was made possible by the security camera that caught them to be leaving a certain dome that was affected, and then minutes later fire broke. So the issue, because these are so many lives that is at stake here that we have to take very seriously in these schools. So employing technology, Daniel Wesonga, can this help? Can the government perhaps make this as a requirement, especially in this boarding school? Because a lot of them right now have electricity for the schools that do. Should they use this? Should they be compelled to ensure that they do at least have some level of surveillance that can help in case such cases arise? And that maybe will scare these disciplined students, a few of them in those schools.
Yes, thank you, Miriam. And of course, I agree with you. The beauty of technology is that technology always comes through for us to enhance efficiency and also make sure that we solve our day-to-day problems. In as much as our old route may be perhaps for schools also to invest more on CCTV cameras. And you've mentioned a very good case study of Miranda High School, where some students were captured on doing maybe fishy activities on CCTV, and the school administration was able to jump into action maybe before the matters spiraled from worst to worst. And I believe that could be a measure. However, we have to come to terms with the reality that that will only solve in curbing perhaps the occurrence of the situation. But the root cause of what is causing this particular chaos and upheaval in schools should actually be addressed through maybe having what Dr. Matsanga proposed yesterday. Do we have guiding and counseling social groups? Do we have maybe schools investing maybe even in mental health awareness of these children? Like I told you, right now we have students who have already adapted to the current technological advances, and therefore teachers should not continue treating them maybe like the previous generations, which had very, very little know-how on how technology works, and they were not much addicted to this kind of the new opium that is technology. So I think best of all, we need to first address the root cause, and then perhaps we could also look towards having these technological equipment like the CCTV. However, as it is, Miriam, I believe this will only help to curb a smaller percentage of it, but I believe in treating the root cause of an ailment rather than maybe just mitigating the symptoms and all that. So to me, I think it will help, yes, but we need to address the root cause. And that can only be done through having a consensus between the education stakeholders, parents, and the children who are in school themselves. We need to have such forums where these kids are brought on board and they are able to speak unequivocally about whatever issues they are facing, what they think it should be improved in their schools, and the way forward. I submit.
All right. Thank you so much. And of course, this is a very important conversation, and we shall continue talking about it, because I think it's about time. As you say there, Daniel, at the end of the day, we have to get to the root cause. What really is the problem, and how can it be addressed, and why is it? I asked yesterday, and I'm still asking today, is it in public schools? What is happening there? What are some of the methods that have been used over time that perhaps right now might be a bit too much for these children? You know, what are the times they wake up? What is the time they go to sleep? Is there too much, the regiment over there? We need to look at all of these things, and then of course indiscipline plays a big part in what we see happening in our schools today. But stakeholders need to sit down and get solutions as soon as possible to the problem that is now plaguing our public schools, especially the high schools. All right, we move on to another matter. And blow for Sonko as Supreme Court clears the way for Kananu swearing in. Nairobi Deputy Governor Anne Kananu is set to be sworn in as the county boss after the Supreme Court yesterday halted a bid by impeached Governor Mike Sonko to delay the event. Ms. Kananu will become the first female governor of the capital city and is allowed to appoint a deputy for the remainder of the term. She has since declared her intention to vie for the seat in 2022 general election. Mr. Sonko wanted the Apex Court to order the Committee on Assumption of Office to put on hold its plans of swearing in Ms. Kananu, pending determination of his case against Appellate Court's decision to disallow his return to office. But the Supreme Court said it does not have the powers to deal with the issues raised by the former governor, meaning Mr. Sonko has now exhausted all legal mechanisms of returning to City Hall. And as well, he should have. I think he decided to take it all the way, and he have. So now he can just relax. And I saw the tweet that he made. The statements that he gave out on social media yesterday, he actually accepted, and he said he will live to fight another day. So there it is for Mike Sonko. Is he likely to come back into an active politics from next year's general election? Sharon Gitonga.
And thank you very much. And indeed, it's actually a new dawn for, Kananu, and being the first female governor actually should speak volume, especially when we talk about women in leadership. And I am personally, so it's actually, I'm actually so proud to hear that we have now, we have spaces for women to actually be at the forefront when it comes to leading. But my biggest, plea to her would be that she has to actually ensure that she capacitates, in terms of capacity building, and actually form a very strong team and also make sure that she brings everyone on board to actually, for her to have, the success of Nairobi. You realize that, Nairobi County is a very critical role. And that is why, even Mike Sonko had to, be very tenacious and actually, fight to the highest, level possible to ensure, to actually see that, justice for him is actually guaranteed. And again, to whom much is given, much is expected. So we will, hold, at the end of the day, if anything goes amiss, we as Nairobians, we will actually hold accountable. I think I was actually looking at a statement by Badi where he actually said that they have actually improved the revenue collection by 1.2 billion. Given that, the period of that time that he has actually been in office, this is actually a positive review. So it actually shows that, Kananu has to be willing to also work, hand in hand with, the NMS.
Does she even have a choice? Forget willing, does she have a choice?
Yeah, we just have to remind her so that she actually doesn't get back in the same trap that Sonko found himself. Let her not let our politics be at the center of the county, because you see the problem with us and the problem with our leaders is that we've actually politicized everything. And remember, at the end of the day, it's about service delivery to the people. So for me, from where I sit, I congratulate her, and I believe that she will actually be able to do this because at the end of the day, we need an efficient service delivery to people. And to Sonko, thank you so much for actually conceding the defeat. I've seen also you say that we live to fight another day. I am waiting to see if Nairobians, or rather even in other counties like Machakos, if we can actually be vied, people can actually bring him on board because he's still young and he still has, the energy to serve. I mean, let's wait and see how all these pans.
Okay, Tawish, when I think about this Sonko's case, reminds me of former president of the U.S., Donald Trump, who, tried to go to court and challenge the certification of the votes, the college votes and all that. So he kept losing after losing after losing until, finally, now President Joe Biden was sworn in. He was just losing. And for Sonko, it appears this was the same thing. And the last time we were having this conversation, now that he has exhausted all legal mechanisms, and it was within his right to pursue. But the last time we were having this conversation, Samuel Tawish, you were wondering, is it his lawyers who perhaps know he stands no chance of actually winning this case, but kept pushing him because they have to get paid? Or what do you think was happening here?
Miriam, thank you so much for that question, and thank you for the submissions by my colleague panelist. Indeed, Miriam, from my perspective, I think this was destiny for Mike Sonko, destiny in the sense that it was bound to happen from the time he was hounded out of office through that impeachment motion by the Nairobi County Assembly. It was something that was quite expressed that he was not going to stay. And any attempt like I've always submitted on this very panel or platform, it was an exercise in futility. And I remember even telling you, Miriam, and when we are having these discussions previously, that I'm sure Sonko just wants to go down in history as a person who exhausted all the legal avenues and all the legal mechanisms that were actually available at his disposal. And you've also brought in the issue of the councils. And Miriam, I can quite tell you, because I've been with these politicians for some time, and I know how they behave. And more often, some of these decisions, it is not out of their own conscience. It is more pushed by these the scholars, they call it the lawyers, who come out and try to persuade them to believe that there can be evidence really to overturn decisions, or at least in their favor. But I've seen more often, like even what happened in Machakos County. I remember when Wavinya Ndeti was beaten by the now current governor, Alfred Mutua, in 2017. We are one of those people who really came out and advised Wavinya Ndeti to call it a day, and perhaps even consider working with Mutua for the sake of the people and for the sake of the unity of Machakos, and she'll have another time really to fight. In any case, some of us were of the view that Alfred Mutua will be serving rather his second and last time in office, and there will be another election come 2022. And if she so wishes, she can still present herself to the people and see whether she can be elected. But because you have these lawyers who think they have a brain more than any other person, that know any other expertise or professional advice supersedes that of a lawyer, they could not listen. And I think this is the predicament that Mike Mbuvi Sonko has also found himself in. But be that as it may, I think the most important part of it is that the people of Nairobi now can have a sigh of relief that we now have a substantive governor in place. She can be able now to carry out with the mandate and the duties of a substantive governor. And Sharon Gitonga has also mentioned a very important thing, that she has to work hand in hand with NMS. I think this is something that is very important. And maybe it's something that also saw Mike Sonko really maybe losing his seat as a Nairobi County boss, because you understand there are a lot of politics, there are a lot of things that happen behind the scene you may not know. If looking into things, and the way he was not so much excited about NMS coming into place, and maybe he felt this was going to prefect his work, and that is why you see is where he is today. So I'm very happy as a Nairobian that we have gotten a substantive governor at last. She's going to be sworn into office, so that there's not so much excuse. We have very little time remaining between now and next year's general election, about 9 or less months, Miriam. So this is not the time to continue politicking. She needs to get back down to work and deliver the services to the people of Nairobi, even as we prepare to go to yet another election come next year. It is this time between now and next year's election that will quite determine whether Kananu will be given yet another term by the people of Nairobi, or will we have to look elsewhere. I submit, Miriam.
Okay, thank you so much. Tawish, sounds like you're homeschooling there. Thank you so much for that. Say hi to the little one. Now, Daniel.
Yeah, the daughters are around, you know.
All right, very well. Say hi. Now, Wesonga, of course, when you look at the tweets by the former governor of Nairobi, I was surprised by the tone, by the maturity, by the decorum, you know, and among the many tweets he's yesterday conceding and thanking the people of Nairobi and, of course, of Kenya for serving them and hoping that maybe one day he'll get another chance to serve us. He also alluded to, God's timing is usually the best. So I guess God wanted him to rest as per now. I don't know.
Yes, thank you so much, Miriam Ogut. And of course, in regards to Governor Mike Mbuvi Sonko, we have to start from when he started to have the ambition to vie. And you remember so well the gubernatorial debate they had at Daystar University. Governor Mike Sonko had already resigned the duties of governor to his deputy. And just to quote whatever he said in that particular debate, he said that he's going to be running the political wing of the county of Nairobi, and he's then Deputy Governor Polycarp Igathe, who will be the one running the business in terms of development and all any bureaucracies that have to do with maybe planning and everything, or day-to-day running of that particular office. So that tells you that this was a lofty order for Governor Mike Mbuvi Sonko to carry on his shoulders. Later on, you realize that when services were not being delivered in the county government of Nairobi, he entered into a pact with the national government where he would actually surrender some of the duties to NMS. And by surrendering those duties, not every governor will actually accept to such an arrangement unless they feel a compulsion within their hearts, maybe their conscience, that they cannot be able actually to effectively run some of these duties. And that was the truth of the matter. Governor Mike Mbuvi Sonko was unable to handle perhaps the massive inflow of the work that was coming in the county government. I believe he was not quite yet prepared to run such an enormous office, owing to the fact that he had never run any kind of organization, be it an NGO or maybe even in government quarters. The only thing we know, he was a successful business person, having a couple of buses in the Eastland area, and with no any experience in any official setting, working environment rather. So I believe this was an overwhelming work for him. And even for him to run for governor, I believe there were some people who were pushing him. Perhaps it was not his own original ambition to be the governor of the county of Nairobi. Going back to what my good brother at Rachel Lesasina has talked about, I believe we had people at the same time pushing Governor Mike Mbuvi Sonko to continue with this particular case that he had in court. And the likes of my good friend Ben Mulwa are the people who have been hanging on the court of Governor Mike Mbuvi Sonko, reaping a lot of benefit from the county. And perhaps as his lawyers are the people who have been eating his money, maybe lying to him that the Supreme Court or maybe the appellate court would have given a much different of an opinion or in terms of ruling. But Miriam, when you look at this particular case, it was so much similar to what former Kiambu Governor Ferdinand Waititu had, and it is based on integrity. And therefore, there would have never been white smoke coming out of it. It was just a wild goose chase. And that is what actually yesterday the Supreme Court confirmed. But in Kenyan politics, you realize that those crooks, those people who loot of entitlement, they feel like it is their right to actually loot of Kenyans' public coffers and go out there and have a right to run for office over and over again, or maybe even a cry fall over it when they are prosecuted in court. But I really like to maybe applaud that step by former Governor Mike Mbuvi Sonko of accepting that perhaps there's always another day, and maybe perhaps he was in the wrong, because that is what the courts have ruled in regards to that particular case. Not like Ferdinand Waititu, who went out there crying false, saying that it was all about witch hunt and all that kind of manner of shenanigans. I think as leaders, in as much as Sonko could be a bad apple, there's some essence or some part of him that leaders should take you from. I submit.
Okay, thank you so much. And that is where we end our conversation this morning. A couple of things that we did not get an opportunity to look at on the Standard newspaper. Military now takes over KEMSA, and Kagwe to appear before Senate to explain. And then CBK alarm on borrowing as CRB listing halt starts. And High Court bars state from sacking medical supplies agency workers. That is also what we had today in the papers. And students who touch schools to miss certificate of good conduct there. And it continues. Of course, Jubilee plots to lock out Ruto allies from NDC. That is a story on page 6. Jubilee announced yesterday that it's planning to have its NDC on the end of this month, I think 30th. So we did not get an opportunity to talk about that. I think we've talked about it before. So now we're just waiting to see what everybody else is waiting to see, or what will happen during that meeting. And what I was looking for going through the paper is a news item I saw yesterday, but I've not seen it being highlighted in the papers this morning, about the rate of a COVID-19 infection in the country, which have significantly gone low. Yesterday, there were no deaths that were reported, and the infection was, I don't know if it was 34 or 54, I'm not sure, but it was quite low out of the over 3,000 samples that were taken yesterday. So as a country, even when it comes to the war fight against COVID-19, I think we're doing very well as a country. So we should continue urging Kenyans to be vigilant, to be careful, wash your hands, wear your mask. Yes, we're still wearing our masks. Kenyans, a lot of them are walking out here thinking that we are safe. So you still need to do that and social distance wherever you can, and sanitize if you don't have water close to you. That will help go a long way in ensuring that you're safe and the people around you are safe and the people that you love are safe too. Thank you so much, Daniel Wesonga, Samuel Tawish, and Sharon Gitonga. We shall be back here on top of the hour, and this time we shall be looking at President Uhuru Kenyatta's legacy. Tunataka kuona so far since the last time we were having a sport check, what else has been happening, and so we'll be helping you keep track on that. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Miriam Mugutu. A very good morning to you.